All right. We are live and we're on all the places we're supposed to be.
Okay, let's do it.
Let's do it. Hello, everybody. Welcome to HeartMind Alchemy Lab Podcast. I'm Holly Copeland, and this is the show of the HeartMind Alchemy Lab community. And we cover topics on consciousness, meditation, awakening, and energy healing. And I am very excited today to have Christine Okezie with me. Welcome, Christine.
Hey, everybody. So good to be here with you. Hi, Holly. Great to connect with you again.
Thank you. So great to connect with you. I had the great honor of being asked to be on Christine's podcast that she runs, the Soul Science Nutrition podcast. A couple of weeks ago, and had just a blast, and it was a wonderful time. And I was just so impressed with her knowledge and background, and felt like she'd be a great fit for this show, and wanted to bring her to this community. So Christine is a holistic nutritionist. She's a natural foods chef, transformational life coach. She's a yogi, so she knows a lot about the topic. She's a practicing Kundalini practitioner herself, as well as an instructor. Mm-hmm. And I just recently heard a podcast that she did this week that I shared with the group about third eye, the science behind it, the ancient practices, Christine. And that one in particular, I just really resonated with me and felt like it would resonate with this group. So I'm just
fantastic.
Thank you so much for being here and spending some time with us.
Thank you. It's wonderful. We just had to continue our conversation because we could just, there was so much more we wanted to, explore together. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. And, I think when I look at the body of your work and the themes, and we'll dive into this, but you just like actually I did with HeartMind Alchemy, this blending of ancient wisdom and modern science is a theme that you carry through your work too, bringing in those wisdom traditions and modern science. And it feels like there's just that you see that intersection everywhere these days, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You and I were speaking a little bit before. It's like people are hungry for that intersection.
Yeah. It's funny. Much in your evolution, it was quite a progression as to how I arrived to, work with this, what I call just sort of a paradigm when it comes to helping people take care of themselves and understand their bodies and their minds. I didn't come necessarily a straight road, but it certainly made sense to me at the time. I came through, I guess, more of the physical health initially. That was really kind of the entree into understanding what's going on with, healing and what does it take. And I came in through, more traditional, like through nutrition and that came through a personal health scare of mine, which, gratefully everything worked out okay. But it was an opportunity for me to really re-examine my relationship with my body and with food. And the more I just started, even before I started to go into formal training with it, did a little bit of, kind of research on my own. And I said, my goodness, food's always been such a limited area for me personally. I had a very difficult relationship with food in my younger years, kind of in that dieting restriction, and it was all about calories. And when I started to get just, a little bit of information how food can be so healing, I said, my goodness, how do I not know this? And where can I go to really, find out more? And that's what put me on the path, essentially, is to, food was the doorway into understanding how the body kind of, works in that regard. So I became a natural food chef because I've always been a foodie. So I said, let me go make peace with food in the kitchen. What better way to do that, And then I, as I started to, and I got my nutrition training. And then when I went through all this, I started working with clients. And initially, we were working with, how to upgrade their food and nutrition. And they're certainly having lots of wonderful physical, benefits. The symptoms were alleviating. But as I did the work more and more, pretty soon that I realized that it was, in order to really be of service, I had to help people with more than eat this, don't eat that, right? And it really came into what I came to realize is the space of habit change and the space of habit formation. right? Because that's really what it was about. It was really dealing with the underlying mental and emotional habits, if you will, that were informing the behaviors that people wanted to shift. And so, of course, like you, when you go into the mental and the emotional aspects of the organism, of our vehicle, then you end up in a much more non-physical discussion about what's really going on. And I think ultimately that's what I started to realize, that, I forget, one of the teachers is, I know we share, is Joe Dispenza, but I think he said science is the new language of the mystic, and I walked into that whole space, started to really understand, well, how do I get people's nervous systems to kind of work for them? And how do I work with this thing called emotion? And what's really going on with emotion physically? And then lo and behold, you end up in this sort of non-physical world. And I think then meditation and yoga and inner work became the focus. And so how could you not end up recognizing that the map of the human body is so much more multidimensional than we've been led to believe? And that was really my entree into the space that we share.
Oh, wow. That's very rich and beautiful.
Thank you.
And I think, like one thing that you said is, talk about this universal life energy that flows through all of our bodies, our physical, mental, and emotional. And when we recognize that and use that, right, as the springboard, because it precedes, what you're saying is the energy, we're energetic bodies.
Yes.
We're not matter. We're not,
yes.
First and foremost, we're energetic bodies. And that looking at all life, everything we do from this energetic standpoint, everything that touches our world, when we start to look, that's what I would love for you to talk about, energetic nourishment, because my sense is that it's using that as the binding factor to look at everything in your life, right?
Absolutely. That is sort of the work, the inner workings of this intelligent system that I've come to just fall in love with, and kind of be really, with that kind of exploratory perspective. So we've got nourishment, and everybody knows about, take care of your food, physically, and move your body and all that. And that's really, really important. You can have a lot of positive change in that. Then you start to work with the mental and emotional body. And of course, that's the psychology and the psychosocial stuff. And that's awesome. Okay. But then how can you have an even deeper impact, as I realize, is when you work at the energetic interface, right? Which is really working with mind and body, and what is really going on here. It's a much more correct, and it's a much more powerful way to work. So that starts working with, all the other designs. So because I'm a yogi, and because I came in through meditation and then found Kundalini, now I understand, when we use the power of the breath, and we use the power of our mental focus, and we use the power, of different postures, creating different systems of pressure in the body, you work with something that, well, quite honestly, it's something you have to experience, but it really is the deepest level of healing, and the deepest level of, kind of shifting that you can have an experience of. And, again, the way I put it is you work with your nervous system, and you work with your endocrine system, and the interface of that is energetic. It really is. So life, people can use the word life force. We can talk about the chakras, I'm really cool with that. But at the same time, we can also just understand that our bodies are kind of one interconnected system. So we can't just work with one. I mean, we can, but there'll be limitations to that, and to your point, people are hungry, I think, for more genuinely, I'd like to say, holistic ways to work with the entire system, So yes, when it comes to, what's really the means to have effective, sustainable change in all aspects of our well-being, I think we have to talk about energy. We have to talk about the non-physical, right? Yeah.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And really what I hear you saying is, going to the root. Like we can stay up here at this higher level, working on our nervous system or these other systems. But if we dive deeper down and go to the root foundation of our being, this energetic root, then we can have a powerful positive impact on the whole system.
Yeah. And, I think that's really, I like to say all healing is self-healing, but really all healing is energetic healing, because all changes in the body, they first start at the energetic level, and then the question is, when it comes to all these areas, these wonderful modalities of vibrational medicine is, in sometime in the near future, hopefully we get to a point where we can start to work just so much at that root cause that we don't have to have the experience of it in that acute somatic phase, right? That's the whole beauty of energetic medicine. It is truly the very first level of preventative care, truly, because before it manifests in the physical body, you have an opportunity to get ahead of it at that root cause, at that deep level. So it's very profound in that regard.
1,000%. I completely agree with you.
Yeah. It changes the whole definition of, what does self-care really look like, Yeah.
So that's a great lead in. What does self-care really look like then when you to you?
Well, from an energetic nourishment standpoint, we work with 3 layers. We work with, biology. So again, that's, working, let's say, with ways to reduce inflammation in the body, for example, or stress, on the nervous system and leading to those, stress-related, disease provoke symptoms. Then we work with beliefs. Okay. And that's, again, the body, as it relates to the psychology of it, our limiting beliefs, our self-perceptions, or attitudes. But then we get to work at the intersection of both of them, right? And that's really the energetic level. So that's where we understand it's really important not just to focus on the body, but to focus on what's the greater intelligent system that's running it. Right. And perhaps there's something here that I can connect to. And that's at the energetic level. That's really understanding that there is actually a field of intelligence that we reside in as we move about in these human beings. So that's, what does self-care look like? Self-care looks like, getting the body, as I like to say, getting the mind in the right setting so that we can be a good vehicle for that intelligence to come through. Right. So, of course, that's when we get into a lot of the inner work, a lot of the contemplative practices that I like turn your eyeballs around, and pay attention to, what's going on inside. Because, we've been, there's a lot of stuff to look at there. But usually it's at the expense of us knowing what's going on right here. And so self-care is really in the, energetic nourishment sense. It's about caring for how you feel. Quite honestly, if you want to just put it really, really simple, how you feel really matters, because it has wide-ranging impact on every aspect of our being. Yeah.
I love that. And I really appreciate, what you're saying and where you took it, which was this divine intelligence that we're all, that is actually what's driving this system, whether we recognize it or not. It's at play, and we can choose to be in flow with that divine intelligence, as all the Zen masters and Buddhist teachers have told us and shared, that we have that choice. Or, to me, what suffering ultimately is choosing to turn away, choosing to not know that divine intelligence system is actually working within us.
That's right. Yeah. And that's by paying attention, if there's a lot of friction in your life, if there's a lot of push, there's a lot of prove, there's a lot of, kind of just angst, then you kind of know, as I say to my clients, you're off track. There's something that, you're missing here. Your scope of perception is distorted or limited in such a way, because what I've come to know, and I know you share this, is that at the end of the day, at the core, our whole purpose here is joy, and somehow we didn't get the manual for that. And we're all trying to find our way back to that, and not in a fluffy kind of way. I'm not, as because this is the whole point. It's it take to be genuinely joyful, like genuine happiness, something that's not dependent on our conditions, our circumstances? What is that? And that's where self-care practices like meditation and yoga and a lot of Eastern healing systems, is that, let's just start with, that's what we know we're wired for.
Right.
Right. So how do we get back to that in the most practical, embodied sense? Right.
Completely. And in my experience, I love how you talked about us being wired for joy, because that's something that I fundamentally believe and experience myself all the time now. And it is not a spiritual bypass. It's, which people can see it as, that you're sort of, you don't see the suffering in the world. But to my experience, it's actually a lived joy, so that you show up ready to be here for all the conditions and issues. But,
well said. Yes. No, it's really that. And that's where we get into, I think the word spirituality, is inevitably the place we end up a lot in these types of discussions. And we talk about, holistic healing and consciousness. And spirituality, for some people, I know for me, at one point would have been kind of a trigger word, and thinking very dogmatic and rigidity. But what I've come to define for myself, and as I share in my work, spirituality is anything that makes you feel love. Anything that makes you love deeper. Again, not fluffy love, but like heartfelt love, and therefore, quite honestly, Holly, I've come to find that almost everything is spiritual.
Right. Oh my gosh, Christine, you're talking my language, right? Because anything that brings love is like, actually, that's the one true thing that exists, right? The one thing that is persistent in all of this experience is love.
Yeah. And it's deep devotion, even suffering, I found. So I'll share an experience. So, my firstborn, my son, we just drove him off to college last week. Okay. And, for always, I'm like, oh, I'm not gonna be one of those moms. They'll be great, go. Right. Oh my goodness. Okay. The incredible emotion that, it was just, I had to work through, it was just incredible. It's this very profound blend of like sadness and pride and awe. But at the end of the day, what I realized, the reason why it was so powerful is that ultimately it was love. It was ultimately mama love, which I don't know if there's any other brand that's stronger, of love, because it was. And instead of me, this is the practice, instead of me kind of holding on and bracing myself, I consciously said, I have to just stay open, and my kind of prayer to myself was, let me feel all of it and lean into it. Because when that happens, this was the proof in the pudding for me in this work, is that it was hard and painful and suffering and, grief, but on its way to love. Ultimately, that's how it moved. So now, the term bittersweet, and there's a reason we use these terms, because it's like, ouch, it's really painful. But if we allow it to really just move in the way that emotions are meant to move, then our heart opens and it literally gets sort of transmuted. There's an alchemy that happens. And so now, it's just, to me, that was just an example of what we mean when suffering can crack you wide open, and all different types. But at the end of the day, if you can kind of rest in love and rest in the greater awareness that there's an intelligence here, that you're held, it's actually quite beautiful. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for sharing that incredible story. And it's so rich, and it's very consistent with my own experience too, that consciousness this is one of my teachers, Blaise Kennedy, does this. Consciousness just wants to open.
Yeah,
it's
100%
opening.
Yes.
And if we allow it to move through us,
yes,
instead of contract, which is the old way. But as you so beautifully said, if we just open to it and allow that sadness, it moves through.
Yeah.
And we are moved by it, and we feel and recognize that it's all just love and emotion, essentially.
There's medicine in it, and that's it. But that takes great mind training, to do that. And that's the whole thing. This is why I love the work that you're so passionate about, is because this is training. This is a life work, kind of process. And in order to find, as a Kundalini yogi, I'm in love with the teachings, I really am. But one of the things that really most resonates with me with my teachers is that that's great. But then how are you applying them in your life? How are you actually interacting with them in real-time situations? And that's what this work of meditation and mindfulness and, all the stuff that you are, standing for is, these are incredibly important tools. So that, because you can't go into 2021 or post 2020, however you want to say it, like I just in the default setting, like leaving this in the default setting. I mean, you can, but it's pretty mediocre living.
Right. It's operating system 1.0, as I like to say.
Rough.
It's really, really rough. When you recognize that operating system infinity exists.
Yes, exactly. We need some upgrades.
We just need some upgrades. And hey, those tools are actually the same tools that have been spoken about for thousands of years.
Absolutely. That's right.
Right, with this new modern science understanding, with tech tools, with the work like you do, and we kind of bring it into 2021 and show people that this is the major upgrade that's available if you go within, right?
There are, and you mentioned the third eye. I want to come back to what you mentioned. Yeah,
please. And I'd love for you to talk about your Kundalini practice and third eye, and kind of how this practice for you integrates all of this.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So third eye, otherwise, AKA the Ajna chakra, so that's, on this body, it's, the space between the two eyebrows. And essentially, it's a kind of a nice nervous system hack, but if you let your eyes gently close like rose petals and just bring your focus to the third eye, kind of not cross your eyes, but just sort of a very relaxed, calm, focused, right? What that does essentially is it places the optic nerve to put pressure on our pituitary gland. And the pituitary gland is the master gland in the body, begins to secrete, and it instantly creates a very beautiful calming effect on the entire system. And that focused gaze, for the most part, is a very important gaze in most of the Kundalini yoga practices that are done. And what that does essentially is, again, it's all about the nervous system and the endocrine system, and working with the part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, that gives us bigger perspective, big picture thinking. And so that part of us comes online. And the part that's sort of that, the limbic system and the fight, flight, freeze system, that sort of takes a back seat. So just that little technique alone right there. And this is what the beautiful thing, I've been doing this now for almost 4 years. And, in the beginning, it kind of gives you a little bit of a headache, there's a little bit of eye strain. Now I close my eyes and that's an automatic thing. It just goes right there. Because it's such a peaceful place to be. And I like to think of it as, again, that's getting the body out of the default setting. That's allowing, myself to come within and say, okay, I'm going to go on, bring the more subtle, develop my subtle senses, my sensitivity. And so a lot of people think, well, that's intuition, right? That's how I see the future. Not really, I mean, that's kind of cosmic and that's cool. There's a whole other podcast, but really, what that does is we are all intuitive. Intuitive means just knowing what to do right in the moment, and wouldn't that be cool? As opposed to, what should I do? Oh, what did I do before? But what in this moment do I have the mental clarity to know is the right thing in this moment? And that's intuition. And that intuitive mind is also a place of neutrality. So, and that's another, what we're ultimately trying to cultivate as a yogi, is an authentic, genuine experience of what's here. Because most of the time, as you know, in this work, we're not really seeing a good picture of reality. There's a distortion going on. There's a misperception through conditioning and culture and just subconscious residue, right? So working with the third eye, also known as the Ajna chakra, is the command center. It literally puts you back in the command of your life force energy, in command of your perception, and they say, right, where attention goes, energy flows.
And doesn't it just kill you that, like, would it that every 4-year-old were taught this?
Oh my gosh, right?
Right? I know.
Oh my God, I know. So instead of handing them, like, here, eat some more goldfish, go into your third eye.
Okay, wait, that is my vision for like 20, how soon we have to wait? 2030?
Sure.
Like, I mean, this is what I want to be the new paradigm. Get into your third eye.
Exactly, get into third eye. Ding, ding. Everybody go into their third eye now.
What if all the teachers, like, you go into kindergarten and the teachers are like, everybody get into the third eye? I mean, why not? Right?
It's a cosmic timeout, right?
Totally, I love it. A cosmic timeout. Oh my gosh. And the other, that is amazing. I love it. And I also want to just comment on intuition, because that tapping intuition, I would say it's actually tapping into, I'm going to use Thomas Hubel's word, tapping into our divine FM.
Absolutely.
That's that divine FM, higher intelligence. It's like, it's the radio station that's available at all times. We just don't know it.
Yeah. So going back to that, right, is we don't get this manual, it's an incomplete understanding of, we're not just a bag of bones, as I like to say, we're so much more. We're a vehicle for something so much more magnificent. And thankfully, we have these practices and tools to have an experience of that. And it just takes a little. That's the whole thing. So you asked me, how does Kundalini work? So in my work as a coach, I found, for the last few years, even before I found Kundalini, I was doing breath work and meditation, because we had to find a way, beyond the thinking mind, to connect to. But now we do, I do a lot of private Kundalini sessions, and I do a lot of sort of therapeutic applications of Kundalini yoga in my coaching work. And like anything else, as a coach, you want to give people tools. So this is really what that becomes. And, and it's not a one size fits all. And that's the beautiful thing, is that you have to find that works for you. But at the end of the day, I want people to understand that you have more control or more regulation capacity available than you think you do. And once you know that, well, that just talk about, dealing with tendencies towards anxiety, or depression. This is very, very powerful technology,
Right. Yeah, it is. This ancient technology is the most powerful technology, right?
Yes.
We are wired for this, aren't we?
We are absolutely wired for this. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And somehow we lost that. Well, they didn't in India, but a lot of the Western world lost that understanding.
Yes. And so what's really lovely again about, the work at HeartMind Alchemy is you understand that it's really about casting a wider net. So, because that's my approach, is that if you want to chant Ong with me, that's cool. I'll do that with you, but you don't have to. But I want you to have an experience of something of yourself that is just, beyond what you've experienced, and so when you develop that self-awareness, and you can use, again, for me, food was a doorway. If people start to just have more awareness about how they feel throughout the course of the day, getting into, because most of us are living above the neck, right? We're just doing. Yeah. So just simply doing some simple mindfulness exercises, everyday mindfulness, all of a sudden people go, oh, that was so relaxing. My mind's not racing so much anymore, right? Mm-hmm. And then you realize that you don't have to be in that otherwise default setting all the time. And then from this place, the body is much more capable of doing what it's meant to do in terms of healing and rebalancing itself and regulating itself, right?
Yeah.
So giving people an experience of themselves, of this multidimensional self, is what makes me so excited about this work.
Yeah. I completely agree. That
Right?
multidimensional aspect, right?
Mm-hmm.
For people to realize that they are not this limited separate self that they take themselves to be.
Right.
And they can tap into this divine FM. They can tap into, I mean, I guess I'd love for you to talk a little bit more, to geek out a little bit more about the
Yeah.
deeper spiritual, higher consciousness realms that you explore, that you access in Kundalini. Can you go a little deeper?
Sure. Well, it's really interesting. So when I first started doing the practice, I was hooked immediately, by the way. And by the way, most people, it either resonates or it doesn't. But when it does, you can't get enough of it, because, like I said, it's almost like you reach a different level of self-awareness that it's just so nourishing. It's so enlivening in many ways. But when it comes to my experience of it, when I first started doing it, I was literally like outside my body, like just really had this experience of the etheric, very, very etheric experience. And you understand what's going on a little bit with that, in terms of just like you said, there's just a part of you that comes online that's just hasn't been online before. I think that's really how I would describe it. And then for me, what it became really clear was, you talk about the separate self. There, in those moments, there was no separation. There is no separation. And that is, it's like a warm blanket, because you just don't worry so much anymore. And I don't mean that, we all have to pay bills, clean our houses, and take care of kids. These are, we still have to keep our feet on the ground in these physical bodies. But that, having that knowing, that deeper knowing that I'm connected to something so much bigger than me. I don't even have words for it. The moment I try to find words for it, I fall short, is been the game changer for me. Because in fact, it's to your point, I'm not transcending the conditions in this world and not seeing the things that they are. I'm actually trying to hold it with more compassion, with more kind of like, yes, this is here right now, but there's a greater intelligence running it. And I just, all I can do is sort of endeavor to, see it through the eyes of love and compassion, through the eyes of evolution. Like everything is happening for a greater good, a greater purpose, And so for me, spirituality and Kundalini are just an opportunity for me to come back to, what does it take to be genuinely happy, genuinely joyful, in this body. And that's what this is about. These are all tools that actually help you do that. They help you find what that genuine level of happiness is. And when you find, so my perspective on, and it's funny because I wrote, it has nothing to do with religion. If that's a context for somebody, that's great for them. But the contextuality, like I said, of this, of the spirit, of the soul, it doesn't have to be in that sense. It's just the sacred. I guess this is where I'm going to come up with this, is that Kundalini yoga, these mind exploration techniques and everything, they are a portal into the sacred. They're a portal into our sacred nature. And it's very beautiful. It's, it helps you see things a lot differently. It's like a new pair of glasses, why not? I always say, why not? So
that's very, very beautiful. And the way that you describe the sacredness of it just really is very beautiful and very touching. And why not?
Why not?
Why not? And it's what it's pointing to is this underlying, the sacred is the loving, right? That this,
100%.
we weren't dropped here with like, without love as the foundation. It actually is the foundation.
Yes, yes, yes. And I love the modern instrumentation we have now to understand the biochemistry of love, the bioenergetics of love, and the emotion, of love is something that is extremely, beautiful and powerful. And we also know the absence of it, right? We also know what happens when we lose that connection to ourselves. In fact, that's what one of the things in Kundalini Yoga that's really cool is that I did a whole podcast on something called cold depression. And cold depression, not in the DSM, but it's actually a clinical or set of symptoms that has been categorized in some sort of like a syndrome, which at the end of the day is kind of the price for modern day living. Cold depression, we get cut off. It's cold because we lose connection with our soul. We lose connection with our life force, so and that is an example of why these practices, are an opportunity to heal yourself on a much deeper level, because instead of just treating our unwanted habits and our coping mechanisms, right? We have to understand that ultimately, and you probably resonate with this, Holly, we've lost our connection to a deep level of satisfaction and contentment that cannot be found outside of ourselves. Just can't.
Totally. Yeah.
Right?
No,
it's all
because
inside.
It's all inside. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like we become cut off from ourselves, which is to become cut off from our own divine nature or our own sacred nature, which is to be cut off from our own love.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Ultimately that.
Yes. And we go about looking for love in all the wrong places, as they say.
Right. We go looking outside ourselves to find
it. And I think that's the epidemic that, we are facing much so these days, in our modern lifestyle. So the antidote to that, you can call it spirituality, but ultimately it's coming back home to that sacred nature in yourself. It's coming back home to what you really are. And again, I invite people to say if this resonates with you, this is an opportunity why you want to try meditation, why you want to try mindfulness, why you want to try breath work, or any of these, practices that give you a deeper level of self-awareness and consciousness.
Beautiful. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I do think that while we're talking about going within, we are also at this phenomenal time where there are supportive communities throughout the world. So you don't have to do this work alone. And in fact, I believe we can actually accelerate this quickening of finding ourselves by connecting to these communities, that we can actually help each other do that. And I know like you have a Kundalini, community and teach that, and I have some communities, Conscious Accelerator, and that I'm HeartMind Alchemy Lab, and so together we can accelerate this process. So it feels like rising together. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And more now, that's the beauty of technology. That's the beauty of our web and interconnected living. We can use technology for good in that regard. But absolutely, finding community, finding your tribe, so to speak, when it comes to, and I like to say, in general, it's, that's been a really important part for me. Like I have sought that out. I want to be in and around folks who are seekers, in and around folks who are, really, really kind of just approaching life with genuine awe and curiosity and want to go deeper, and that's, even that in itself, I'll be honest with you, you probably had the same thing. There are folks in my life who just, I don't vibe with anymore. They just doesn't resonate, literally. And so to your point, it's important, I think, for us to find people, and these days we, many, many ways to do that, to find people who will support you in your journey of, personal exploration and inner growth. Really important. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And that shared, even kind of the emerging science about global coherence too, right? Like it's actually not just, I mean, it's nice to connect with people, but actually there's like, we know that our hearts come into coherence, as you and I are talking, our hearts are resonating and our vibrations are sharing. So it's actually that we can help each other on this journey together, right?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I mean, so many studies on the power of prayer, power of group prayer, so many studies on, actually not even studies, but actual groups that are out there doing, and I think, who's the one who does the field, who they get off, is it Eileen? It might be.
Yeah, Eileen McCusick, the biofield. Yeah. Yes, that's one of my practices.
Absolutely. And, just the power of community, which again speaks to our design, and speaks to our this incredible like capacity within us that we haven't even really explored, Yeah, you're right.
Absolutely. And I just want to also dive into something you said a little bit earlier about Kundalini and developing those subtle senses.
Yeah.
Which, to talk a little bit about, like we kind of, I think, experience the world at first in a very coarse level, energetics. And then when we go meditation, we develop these finer and finer senses. And you talked about it. So can you talk a little bit more about this, about the subtle senses that you develop?
Yeah. So for example, another component of the practice is the use of sound and what we call mantra. Okay, so it's basically sound current and chanting in that regard. And again, such a fascinating intersection of, the science of these ancient practices. But chanting, again, when I first walked into my first Kundalini class, I was like, what is going on here? Because it's the most foreign aspect, quite honestly, of yoga. You just don't do that in like a gym yoga class. But it's my favorite part, and it's the most transformative part. So when you use the sound of your own voice and you chant these sacred, ancient mantras, and again, it's so fascinating. If you understand what they mean, it's beautiful. But the design of the words, they're usually in two languages. They're either in Sanskrit or Gurmukhi, which are ancient Indian, Eastern languages. The enunciation, the way that your tongue hits the roof of your mouth as you're chanting and making sounds, or you're getting the certain shape and vibration on your lips. The way that you are repeating it, and the effect on the neurology and the neural pathways, all these things give you a very, very cosmic experience of what's going on. We know that chanting and sound actually does rewire the brain. And this is something so profound because it's something that you can do using your own body and voice as this instrument. So it's very powerful. So there are many times where the meditation, a lot of people think meditation, you sit still. All of Kundalini is one big meditation. If you're doing like something as simple as a cat-cow exercise for 3 minutes, you're bringing a meditative quality to that movement. That's what's so profound about Kundalini. The third eye, that is a meditation. Any kind of mantra meditation, so 3 minutes, 7 minutes, 11 minutes, there's something called tantric yoga or white tantra. That was the most profound experience that I've had of chanting. That was like a 6-hour experience, 300 people in a room, you're all partnered up. It's quite fascinating. Literally, you are literally transported somewhere differently. I mean, it takes you to a whole new level,
So all these, one of these.
Oh, I know. I'm hoping, post COVID, they'll bring it back, but it's really amazing. So you've got the, sound, you have breath, you have eye focus, you have the posture, all these experiences designed to have very specific, neurological and glandular system changes in the body, which give you a whole different sphere of consciousness. I mean, really, Kundalini Yoga is called the yoga of awareness because it brings a lot of stuff up. You might just thinking, oh, I'm getting some really good abs doing these core exercises. Well, you're actually working with the subconscious mind. So you might just all of a sudden be bursting into tears, tears are running down your face, or you are hysterically laughing, or some version of that in between, because you work on all those deeper energetic levels. I like to say, I mean, in many ways, I feel like my morning practice, I get high every day. I mean, it's kind of, there's nothing like it in that regard. So I don't know if I answered your question. We were going with that.
Subtle energy. We were talking about developing subtle senses. That was a beautiful answer.
Yeah. So those are, it's 100% like a different experience of yourself, of life, the aliveness that you feel. I mean, one of the things that came into my subtle senses is I started vibrating, like my whole body, vibrates. Like if I get still, I can feel, I don't know if I can feel the blood coursing through my veins, that's a little, strange, but I feel the general vibration in my body all the time. Yeah. And for a while, it's, oh my God, am I getting like neuropathy here? But it's true. That's a perfect example. Like, I'm so much more aware. I also feel like I see and hear things very differently since I've been doing this work. Like nature is really, really bright, and so. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to go out on a limb to ask you this question, but but I'm just dying to ask. So, okay.
Yeah.
So, right. I agree. I don't do Kundalini, but I do tantric yoga and Kriya yoga and other practices that are similar.
Yep.
Inner fire practices. And so all that central channel breathing, right? We're moving energy up the spine.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So when I started to do that for the first time, I noticed, like, having never done that before, that the impact on my, I'll say my sexual life was huge and profound. Like all of a sudden it was like it woke up all the organs down there in a really great way. My husband wasn't too upset about that one. I'll put it that way to be discreet. Like you recognize that as women, because we don't talk about this, and it's a little bit of my beef that like we don't really talk about.
Oh my gosh, yes. Sexuality, spirituality, consciousness. Yeah.
Right. Yep. And did you also experience those kind of like, really started moving things down there in a positive way?
It's really, yes. And it's really interesting. When I understand a little bit about more, and I understand why that it creates such a dynamic experience, because Kundalini energy and sexual energy is creative energy. It's the most powerful energy. It creates life. Hello. Right.
Exactly. I just started doing, ovarian palace exercises where you draw energy from the ovaries into the sacrum and then up the spine. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And,
right. It's life force energy.
It's life force energy. It is. And so for those people that want to clarify, root lock or mula band. So at the end, pretty much at the end of every posture in a sequence of postures that we do in Kundalini, we will be engaging a root lock. So that's, you squeeze your rectum, your sex organ, and your navel. Your navel is the space right below your belly button. You pull that in. So what that does is creates almost like a hydraulic pressure, with it. And what you're doing is you're moving that life force, that Kundalini energy, out of those lower energy centers, which correspond to all the different organs, by the way, right? All the reproductive organs, certainly all the lower digestive organs, and we move and squeeze that energy up, right? And that's the idea. The idea is that, again, health is when prana and energy is flowing up throughout the body, right? Up into the higher centers. And we get into why we want that is for that clarity, that true vitality. But at the end of the day, yes, 100%, that is a very interesting and beautiful part of it, because, and in fact, one of my teachers will go on to say that if you don't have tools to train and work with your sexual energy in that way, your creative, your primal energy in that way, then it will rule you. Do you know what I mean? Then in many ways, we get into, you can call it, just sort of, you get very kind of just driven by your impulses, in that regard. So it actually, going back to this concept of training, working with the energy body is working so that we don't get stuck in the primal kind of instinctual settings, which implies, in terms of our sexual energy, that's our most primal base energy. So you want to have that balanced, you want to have that flowing, you want to have that connected to heart and connected to intuitive mind, right? So then you're a much more balanced and coherent experience of yourself, right? So yes, the answer is it's a beautiful thing. It really is. It's a very dynamic process to work with energy and the central channel that way.
Yeah, but beautiful. And I mean, again, sort of like things you wish you were told when you were, 13, right? Or 10.
Yeah.
That somebody would teach you, and, coming as a woman, like we start aging and, we've been in marriages for a while and our kids are, toddlers, and kind of that whole area of life starts to get difficult, I think.
Yeah.
And if you've never been taught to work with that energy, I know that for me, when I came into that, I just kind of felt dead down there, like just not alive. And when I started to work with it, it was like a giant waking up of this whole, the sexual energy and everything, and with all kinds of amazing benefits.
Absolutely. And it's a beautiful thing because, to your point, it's not something that many folks have yet to talk about. A lot of, well-respected, people in the field of consciousness don't address, that. And in Kundalini, we talk about that as, we need feminine. We call it the divine feminine, and we call it working with, our Shakti energy and all of that. So it's very much honored. It's very much, something that we want to be able to stand in. And, in many ways, and this is probably a topic for a different podcast, but sexuality is, something, it's an aspect of, it's a way for us to connect again to that sacred. It's a way to connect to us to something that sort of magnificent life force energy. It's the energy that creates life. So it's a very beautiful, it's a dimension of all of us. And it, I think it's not separate. Again, growing up, looking at the dogma, it was always sort of relegated, right? It's like, you can't be spiritual and talk about sexuality. But I actually think, going back to what I said before, everything is spiritual. I think that's just another dimension of our potential as fully, alive humans, exploring that aspect of ourselves.
1,000%.
Yeah.
And maybe you'll need to come back so we can do the sexuality episode.
Why not?
Why not? Right? Because there's so much shame and guilt around this. And as you're so beautifully talking about, like this is the center, the womb is the seat of our life force, of our creation. It's in fact to be revered and honored and loved. And I feel like until we, like that whole waking up of consciousness is waking up the divine feminine
in all of us.
In all of us, men included, by the way.
That's right. 100%. Exactly. Yeah. And that speaks a lot to, again, the body shame that, so many of us have, bought into. And a lot of that goes with it. So you brought up an interesting point about, aging, well, one of the things I love about Kundalini Yoga, or I'm sure yoga, because we see, these 105-year-old yogis, they're amazing, but you'll know that when it comes to working with the spine, it's really, really pivotal in the practice of Kundalini Yoga. And they say you're only as young as you're only as old as your spine is inflexible. So, keeping the spine really healthy is what keeps you young, and all of that. So these practices really do, as you said, have many benefits. They actually slow down the aging process, so everything just, works so much better when we take care of ourselves at these deep levels, at this, root cause level.
Yeah. Oh, so beautiful, right? Because it's really what you're saying is, and what these practices are speaking to, is that when we allow that life force energy to flow freely throughout the body, lo and behold, everything works.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, so beautiful. Oh my gosh, Christine, I just love talking to you and appreciate
so much fun.
Wisdom in all of this so much. Well, as we wrap up, is there anything else that you'd like to share, or I don't know, something just that we didn't get to that feels important to say?
Thank you. I guess, what I get from our conversation, I guess, is that, when we talk about this work, quote unquote, of taking care of ourselves, I just, it is really my hope that folks understand that when it comes to, true well-being, it's really an inside job, and it's so distracting out there. There's so many, shiny objects, that are trying to tell us, do eat this, do that, move this, but at the end of the day, you have everything you need, and this is the kind of the gold that I've discovered more and more each time. It's a deepening process. We really do have everything we need inside of us to find that level of joy and contentment and empowerment. And from that place, then you go out into the world, and then you let that creative life force energy flow. And then, miracles happen, at that point. So I guess that's what's coming through.
That's so beautiful. That's perfect. That's a wonderful place to leave it. And I couldn't agree with you more about that.
Thank you.
And there's so much, I know that people are suffering so much in the world right now. And so I just want to acknowledge everybody who's listening. I really hope that you feel that you can take something from this conversation and recognize that this well-being is available, that it's right here. There's communities here to support you in finding that. Many exist. And just maybe a message of hope, because when we can heal ourselves, as you just so beautifully said, when we find and heal ourselves, then we can help all the people around us that we see suffering, that we are so distressed about, right?
Yes. Healing ourselves, and doing the great work to show up, in the world with that degree of presence and compassion. Well, what if we all did that? What kind of world would we be creating, right? And that's the hope, that's the work, and that's the dedication that we have to our practices, is I do it for me, but I know when I do it for me, I do it for all, because then that's just how we're wired. Going back to your, that's our design, right? And we show up, and miracles can happen, and all of it. So absolutely. It is. And I think that's a really, I'm sorry, this is interesting, because sometimes we think, well, it's spirituality, it's like self, it's individual. Yes. And truthfully, the end goal of working on at that individual level is because we know we're doing it for the benefit of the collective, for the greater whole, because that's how you start to see yourself ultimately. Yeah. Right.
Absolutely. Perfect. Well, thank you again so much for being here. And
thank you, Holly.
I can't recommend your podcast highly enough.
Thank you.
Soul Science Nutrition. Is that right? Did I get it right?
That's it. Yep. Soul Science Nutrition and energeticnourishment.com. Yep.
Okay, great. And just wishing you the best. Thank you again, everybody, for listening. And
thank you.
We'll see y'all soon.